Hey friends, okay, so parenting is always challenging, but doing it solo comes with its own set of unique hurdles that can, at times, feel overwhelming to say the least. In this episode, I chat with the amazing Dr. Gila, a single parent coach, a psychologist, and a neuropsychologist, and a single mum who has been through it all. We dig into why single parents need supportive spaces because no one should do this alone, and we explore the unique challenges and the unexpected joys of raising kids solo. Dr. Gila gets real about the pressure to be perfect and why letting go of that myth can be one of the best things that you give to yourself and to your kids too. And yes, let's get into the buzzword of the moment, self-care. Dr. Gila introduces her really practical sink model, yes, sink as in the thing that's in your kitchen, for managing emotions, for showing up. She shows us why it's not about the one drop that overflows, but the build-up that leads to it. So you can learn how to spot when your sink is filling up and what true self-care looks like when you're already stretched so thin. So if you're a single parent or you know someone who is, this episode is packed with insights, with practical tips, and the reassurance that you are not in this alone, even when it really seems like it. We can tackle the messy and the beautiful chaos of single parenting together. I think you guys are going to love this conversation with Dr. Gila. And by the way, today, her Single Parenting Summit begins. It is live. You can still get your free ticket, even if you're listening to this a little bit later or tomorrow. The summit is on from the 10th to the 12th of February, so you have time. Sign up today. It is free. I'm going to put my link for this summit in the show notes or the YouTube description underneath this video. So you'll be able to click on the link. You'll be able to get your free ticket to her Single Parenting Summit. She's got over 20 experts for a really empowering event that is dedicated to single parenting with connection, not perfection. And I was lucky enough to be one of the speakers at her summit. So I think you guys will absolutely love it. As usual, just before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Darug Nation. They're the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work, and record this podcast. I pay my respects to First Nations people, their elders, and ancestors, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and I stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Hi, Dr. Gila, how are you?
I am so good, so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I'm really excited to talk to you because I know that this is a huge topic we're going to be talking about, and I think it's going to really share a lot of wisdom, a lot of insights, and be really supportive for a whole lot of parents and caregivers out there. I think regardless or not, as to whether they're a single parent. But do you think our conversation and what we're going to share, or what you're going to share, is going to be valuable for only single parents, or do you think any kind of parents and caregivers are going to take something away?
Yeah. So first of all, there's so many common themes that apply to parents of all kinds. And second of all, I so often hear people say, I'm not a single parent, but I sure feel like one. There are so many times when I feel like I am here by myself. And sometimes that can be even lonelier, to be honest. Sometimes when someone else is in theory supposed to be there, but maybe isn't as much, that can be even harder. But certainly, I think that a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to apply to pretty much everyone.
Mm-hmm. I think I've said that before. I don't know if I've said it
Yeah.
aloud, but in my head, I've been like, the times that my husband will be out for the evening or something, or, with his mates. And I think, okay, it's just me for like bedtime and dinner time and everything. And then I kind of just feel this sense of like, okay, like,
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's a bit of a sense of I can just do it my way in my time, and I don't feel like, come on, why aren't you helping? Or hurry up. Like you said, you would bath the kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 And of course, there are differences, right? So I know a lot of single parents who are really doing it on their own. It can be hard to hear partnered parents say, oh, I'm solo parenting this weekend because my husband is traveling. And there are differences, right? A single parent doesn't know that that person is coming back. They don't have that person to even check in on the phone necessarily. They don't know they have that context. But certainly, if you're doing it on your own, even for a few days, you have some of those same challenges and blessings, like you just said, right? In a way,
Yeah.
it can be nice to be able to, oh, I can do this however I want to do it. I don't need to do it the other person's way. I can choose how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, I really like that. Okay. And yeah, I don't want to be insensitive to single parents who are doing it on their own and don't have that opportunity to, that parent, the other parent will just be home tomorrow or in a couple of hours. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. So,
Yeah, I mean, again, not to detract from either experience. I think that sometimes if you're used to having a partner and they're not there, it can be challenging in its own way because you're not used to it. Whereas when you're a single parent, you do eventually sort of fall into these, um, a rhythm and a way of doing things so that there is an adjustment if you go from partnered to single. There is an adjustment, and then you find your groove, I think, and you find the blessings in it and of course the challenges. So each has their own blessings and challenges, I think.
yeah, I really love how you put that, the blessings and the challenges. Um, Before we kind of jump into some of the meat of the conversation, can you let people who maybe they're not familiar with your work yet, can you just let them know a bit about your journey in terms of work and what you do, and also your journey in parenthood as well?
Yeah, because they're closely intertwined. So, I started out my professional life as a psychologist and a neuropsychologist. And what I like to say, because I think and hope that it's validating to parents out there, is that even with all of my fancy degrees and training and experience, single parenting a strong-willed kiddo has been challenging. And so I took a deep dive into really figuring out, and it's a continual process, a work in progress. So, into the work of supporting my child in the way that he really needs and that he deserves. And along the way, I really became passionate about helping other parents do the same. And I've increasingly been focusing on supporting single parents because I have noticed that there isn't that much out there for single parents specifically. And again, there are a lot of themes that apply across the board. Single parents have to deal with the meltdowns and the tantrums and, the mental load and getting kids to school and making lunches and all those things and self-regulation and communication. But then there's also things that are different. They just are different when you are a single parent. And I found that, I remember there was this one day I was on Instagram towards the beginning of becoming a coach. And that day, for whatever reason, there were three posts and reels that I encountered like right after each other. And they each were a little bit of like a landmine or a zinger, as I like to call it, for single parents. Things like, why it's so important to model healthy communication with your partner in front of your kids, right? Why it's so important for your child to have an active dad in their life, like things like that, or how to tag your partner in when you need a break. So these are things that can really, there's beautiful parenting resources out there, and I'm so grateful for them. I've benefited from them myself. And what will happen is a lot of it is applicable to single parents, but then suddenly there will be that zinger. And so I wanted to create spaces and support for single parents where they're not going to worry about stepping on that landmine and being triggered, or content that isn't applicable or might be upsetting in some way. And then the other piece is that there are blessings also of being a single parent, and there are some like unique aspects. And so I think that I've become increasingly passionate about really naming that and bringing it to the forefront and offering support and spaces for that. And so I want to thank you for covering this on your podcast, because it's not something that is always talked about and named. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I love that you shared so wholeheartedly about why you're passionate about serving and supporting single parents and their families. And I know you talk a lot about the incredible value of having supportive spaces specifically for single
Mm-hmm.
parents. Why is that so important?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think because often as single parents, we will sort of be walking in the world consuming content and occasionally feel that awareness that we are different, right? That something doesn't apply to us, or it hits that guilt zone or that fear zone, right? It sort of like triggers that internal narrative that you're already walking around with. And it can feel really isolating and alienating. And then the other piece is that I think on the positive side, it can be really beautiful and just sort of soul nourishing to be in spaces with people who get it, right? They have, now, I want to say as a disclaimer, there are many paths to single parenting. There are many flavors of single parent, as it were, and not all of them are identical. And even if you come to it in the same way as someone else, your experience is going to be different, right? We are a heterogeneous group, absolutely. But there are some things, and my clients say it all the time when I'm in groups, that it's just so nice to be in a space where you know the other people get where you're coming from. They get those challenges, the blessings, the fears, the worries. They get it. And so I think I deeply believe in the power of community. And I think that it's just so supportive when you can feel seen in that way. And you don't
Yeah,
have to explain it, you
yeah, it's
know?
like you have that you find your tribe, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I'm
yeah.
glad I know that coming in the new year, you have your summit for single parents.
I
So
do. I'm so excited.
that's going to be awesome. I'll probably ask you about that at the end because I know if people are listening to this, nodding their head, going, yes, oh my God, I get those challenges and I get it when I meet someone else who's a single parent. I'm just like, oh, you get it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I will ask you about that because, as you said, community is like, it's so important no matter what kind of community is. It could be like a work related thing, or it could be I don't know, a sport thing. I've just started like pickleball a few weeks ago, and
Yeah.
I'm making friends, and you know what I mean? Like any kind of community where I think you have the same, I don't want to say interest, but you have the same experience and the same challenges and the same problems and issues and stresses. But then you
Mhm.
can obviously share some positives and some wins and some blessings. I think, we're humans. We want to feel like we're
Mhm.
supported in community.
Yeah. And I think also the sheer fact of sort of this tangible reminder that you are not the only one who has this different family structure and this is different, because sometimes it can feel like everyone has the white picket fence life, right? You look on Facebook, you look on Instagram, even in your kids' school, it often feels like there's often an assumption and there's a default that there are two parents involved, that it looks a particular way. And so it can feel like you're the only one struggling with this. And so, what I want to say, if anyone's out there listening and feeling like that, I have been amazed. So, as I have specialized more and really sort of leaned into supporting single parents, I've been amazed everywhere I go, and everyone that I say that to, it's either, oh, my sister just got divorced, or my best friend is a single parent, or, I'm a single parent. And often people don't talk about that part of their identity because, it doesn't come up, or they don't really want to put it at the forefront. And so I want to say to you, you are absolutely not the only single parent out there. You're definitely not the only single parent struggling if you feel like you're struggling. And so, yeah, you're not alone. That's far from alone, I would say.
Yeah, I really love that. I have a couple of friends who I know at the moment are going through this really, really tough period, and one in particular, I'm so thankful that a few of us friends from different kind of spaces in their life, we're all kind of rallying around to say, what do you need? Like, how can we help with the kids, or with just, some easy meals in the freezer? And I know that stuff is like, that's not making a huge difference in terms of the
Oh, no.
emotional stress, but I'm like,
Mm.
maybe I don't know if you have any advice on like what when parents are in that acute phase and they're going through the separation, how do people, this is almost like a, for the people who are around them, do you have any kind
Mm.
of tips?
Hmm. I mean, I think that's beautiful because, first of all, so you're addressing two of, I think, the biggest stressors. One is the logistics of being a single
Yeah.
parent. And so, you know, it is tough. The logistics are tough. And especially if you're a working single parent, if you have multiple kids, I mean, any version of it, it's tough. And so helping out in that way is beautiful. And then the other piece is the emotional piece, right? Feeling alone in it, feeling isolated in it, feeling if it is something that you're transitioning into and your identity before was similar to everyone else in your life, right? That you're partnered and now you're different in this way. And so I think it's beautiful that you're showing that you are there to support them and that you're not turning your back on them, even though they're different in that way now. Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
Are there any things that your clients say, or, even from your own experience, that actually are really meaningful? Maybe some of the more, like you said, logistics that can help, pickups and
Mm.
drop-offs for kids and school, and, but maybe the other stuff that you thought or that you've heard, this has actually really helped when a friend has reached out and, said or done
Mm.
this.
Yeah, so one thing that comes to mind, it's a great question. I haven't thought that much about before.
Sorry,
And I mean, I
throwing
just
in.
want to say like, no, but how beautiful a question is that? So it's warming my heart that this is the perspective you're bringing to it. So thank you for that. One thing that comes to mind for me when you say that is emergencies. So I think that a huge fear for single parents and parents everywhere, but then like, so I like to say, single parenting is a little bit of like a stress magnifier. So a lot of the things that we're stressed about, a lot of other parents are going to feel, but maybe the single parenting context might magnify it. And there's other situations that magnify it too, not just single parenting. So of course, God forbid something happens, and it's I think a very common fear, right? What do I do with my kids if something happens to me and I need to go to the hospital? What do I do with the other kid if I have to take this kid to the hospital? What do I do, if this happens? And so that I think is a very common anxiety and fear. And so if there is a single parent in your life that you are close with, and it's hard to ask for help, of course, for all of us, not just single parents. And so offering to be backup, phone a friend, like, what can I do on your emergency plan to support you in those times? And to make it so that they don't have to really ask that would be, I think, amazing. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Yeah.
Wow, I never even thought of that, but those moments where you just hope they never happen, but you might
Of
think, oh
course.
my God, I can't pick up my kid today, or, I'm stuck
Yeah.
in traffic or something, health wise goes wrong. So that's actually really
Yeah.
helpful. And I think you just mentioned, so that they don't have to kind of ask, or so that almost that you're addressing those sticky, tricky things before they come up, so that when something stressful happens, then they
Mhm.
immediately hopefully go, okay, I'll call Steph, or like so
Mhm.
and so, so that other stuff is kind of at least
Yeah.
covered. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to ask. And I want to say on the other side of it, the message to the single parents is that, of course, it is hard to ask, and you deserve that support and you deserve to have people in your corner. And no matter how isolated you are, I feel confident that there are people who would step in and help. And so to give yourself permission that it's not weak to ask for that, and that to give yourself permission to seek out and accept help.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked a bit about the challenges and the blessings. So that kind
Mm.
of uniqueness, I think, with the single parenting journey. What are some of the maybe unexpected joys, or as you call them, blessings? Like, what are some of those things that maybe if a parent's going through a separation or a divorce
Mhm.
could, shift their focus a little bit on, just to bring in some of the sort of positive if they're feeling very, um, stressed at the moment?
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest blessings is that when you are the parent in the home, when you're the sole parent in the home, even if you have a co-parent in another home. But in your home, and even forget about the structure, in your relationship with your child and your children, that you get to call the shots, that you are in the driver's seat and you get to decide what that relationship is going to look like. And in theory, that's true even if you're partnered. But I think often, especially if you're going through a divorce, there's often been tension leading up to the divorce. The divorce doesn't happen overnight, right? And separation doesn't come about on a dime usually. Usually there's stuff leading up to it. And so it can be really freeing and really empowering to know and really lean into. It can take time to really lean into it, but to really lean into that you get to make the decision about what kind of parenting relationship you want with your child, and you get to sort of create that that vibe and that energy that you want in your home. And I think that's one of the most empowering things. Now, it is also a big responsibility, and that can feel heavy. And so what I like to remind people around this is that perfection is never the goal, right? And so I think that is, I say it in pretty much every interview, perfection is never the goal for two reasons. And one is that it's, of course, not realistic. So even, I mean, I don't even know what it means to be a perfect parent, but let's say there was, some definition of perfect parent. It's not realistic. But also, it's not desirable, because if we are perfect, whatever that looks like, then we are not modeling for our kids the fact that people aren't perfect. Being human means not being perfect. It means doing things and saying things that you sometimes regret. And it doesn't give us an opportunity to model that repair and reconnection, which is so important. And I always say, every time I quote unquote make a mistake in parenting, it makes me a better parent, right? Mistakes are how we learn. And we tell our kids that often, but we forget that we're allowed to make mistakes too. And so I want everyone to hear, right? You are in the driver's seat in your relationship with your child. And that's really empowering, and also can feel heavy. And know that it's okay, and in fact, good, to not always do it perfectly.
Oh, that is like the best advice I've heard all year. That makes me feel very validated and seen. You know what? I was, as you were saying, when we have this like idea, whatever that is, of perfection and doing things perfectly, and we know that that's unrealistic and unhelpful, it kind of gives, I'm just like thinking out aloud. So this might not make sense, but this concept of like when we make a mistake, so maybe we raise our voice, or maybe we, are a little bit too harsh, or maybe we, act in a way that we usually wouldn't, or don't want to, or we regret. Even kind of that concept of a mistake, like it's got such a negative connotation. You've made a mistake, you've done something bad or done something wrong. You shouldn't do that as a parent. And therefore your kids shouldn't make mistakes, even though we're teaching and model, we're talking about mistakes are healthy and normal and natural, and they help us learn.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's this kind of like inner battle in me thinking, I wholeheartedly agree. Let's not be perfect. Let's mess up and make mistakes so that, as you said, we can repair, we can make amends, we can show that we don't have it all together, and you're not supposed to, because you're human. But yeah, this concept of like a mistake is seen as like, you shouldn't do that. And I didn't mean to. And so now I have to fix it. Like, I don't know where I'm going with that, but does that kind of
I
make a little bit of sense?
but yeah. So at the end, what you were saying, I wonder if part of what you're saying is, it's not necessarily about undoing it and fixing it. It's about repairing to move forward. So it's not about like trying to erase the fact that it happened. It's about using it to grow, right? It's that growth mindset, using that experience to get better, be better, and grow as a person, as a parent, in relationship. And I think it's so true. I mean, we are so much harder on ourselves. Like if our kid made a mistake, we would, of course, be understanding. And then we make a mistake and we shame spiral, and we all do it. And it just, we don't give ourselves permission to be human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. It sucks. We're all works
Yeah.
in we're all works in progress. But
But you know what? The fact that we don't do that, that is also part of our imperfection. And so we can embrace that, right? We can embrace that we tend towards shame and say, oh, that's my brain trying to protect me, right?
yeah.
Thank you, brain. I got it.
That's so good. Okay. Let's move on to self care. We hear a lot about self care, and sometimes I think to a lot of people it still feels like a buzzword, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you have this amazing sync model for understanding
Mm-hmm.
emotions
Yeah.
and self care. Can you explain what real self care looks like and why it's so vital to parents so that they can sort of stay emotionally balanced?
Yeah, so self-care is kind of like a four-letter word these days, right? And I get it. I mean, I sometimes feel like if one more person tells me that I just need to engage in self-care, I may slap them, right? Because how are you supposed to fit that in? I mean, you're barely trying to survive sometimes, keeping your head above water. So um, yeah, so the model that I use in my own family and with my clients is based on this sync idea. And so the concept is that we have an internal metaphorical sink, not a real sink. And when the sink is really full, just a few more drops of water are going to make it overflow. And that overflow, that's the dysregulation when you lose it, when you flip your lid, as they say, right? And when your sink is emptier, the exact same drops of water that made it overflow in that first scenario, you're going to be totally fine with. And you can even handle more water. And the thing is that our sinks are always going to get water in them. That is how life is, right? There's always going to be flow into our sinks. And so the what part of what I like about the sink analogy is at the bottom of the sink is that drain, right? And if we can keep that drain nice and healthy and open and clear of all those clogs of hair, I don't know if you're like me, but I always end up with those clumps of hair in the in
Yep.
the in the drain, right? And if you have a big clump of hair in the drain, you can deep breathe all you want. That sink is still going to overflow, right? So the idea is that, yes, things like bubble baths and massages every once in a while, if you can do them, wonderful, great. But that's kind of like taking a bucket to the sink and like emptying a big bucket load of water. And really, to take care of the drain, we need more of like day to day, moment to moment systems in place that keep the drain from being able to get full really, really quickly. So, and I will say, one of the things that can fill your sink really quickly is someone else's sink overflowing into it. And so that's often what happens when our kids' sinks are overflowing. So, this is part of why it's so much more important as parents for us to take care of our own sinks because we need that space to be able to show up and take care of our kids when because they're still working on, they're still working on developing these skills. So the more space that we can have in the sink to take on some of that overflow, which is that co-regulation piece, the more we can show up for them. So I'm sure you're wondering what's an example of taking care of your drain.
I am,
Um,
but I'm also thinking of me telling my kids, can you stop flooding my sink?
yeah, yeah. I use it with my son. I think, it is a great visual. Kids can really grasp onto it. And having that shared language, one of the things I like about it is that it's not judgy because it's not like you are doing something or you are malfunctioning in some way. It's that there's this sink in you and you can observe and learn to observe, oh, your sink is starting to get full, right? So that's like the holy grail is if we can start for ourselves and for our kids to recognize sooner when our sinks are starting to get full, not waiting until when it's overflowing. Because when it's overflowing, it's much harder. I mean, if you picture a sink that's overflowing, right? It's kind of like an I Love Lucy episode where like water's going everywhere. I can't turn off the tap. So if we can catch it earlier, then we can maybe turn down the faucet a little bit, right? We can maybe empty a bucket load of water. We can unclog that drain. And so there's more we can do if we catch it sooner. So using that language can be helpful. And then the other thing that I think is really helpful is knowing that often when our kid flips out, or when we flip out, or when anyone flips out, we usually focus on those last drops of water, right? What triggered that overflow? When the truth is, it's not just the drops of water, it's what happened until then, right? So it's the context of how full the person's sink was going into it, which explains why, for example, talking about sinks, one day you might completely lose it if you see dirty dishes in the sink that weren't put in the dishwasher. And another day it might stress you out, but you're not losing it. And that's why, because your sink has been sort of full.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I love this analogy. It makes so much sense. It's something I think that we can easily express to our kids, right?
Mm-hmm,
Even really young ones in an
mm-hmm,
age appropriate way, and explain to them
mm-hmm,
about the sink, inside them, and draining it and the overflow and things like that. I think that's
mm-hmm,
so good. I
mm-hmm.
also, for the first time in years, had a blocked sink in our kitchen. And I literally had to, like, I was like, my brother came over for helping with some gardening stuff. And he was like, oh, why have you got all these dishes? I was like, oh, I have to unblock the sink. And he did it for me. And I loved it. I was like, thank you so much.
Oh.
Just that one thing, I was like, oh, it's a thing off my to-do list. So thank you.
Yeah.
So maybe we finish up with, do you have some things that your clients do, or that you tell to your clients, or that you do, that are the little ways that you can unplug, take the plug out
Yeah. Yeah.
of the sink, if that makes sense?
Yes.
What can we do?
Yes. So, okay, lots of things. So I won't go into all of it, but let's see. So one that I want to share is an example of a hair clog. So this was from a client of mine who had like one of her worst days of parenting ever. The kids were exhausted. She didn't get much sleep. She just wanted to rest, and the kids really were like, and single mom by choice. So really, it's all her. Um, and she snapped at them, and then she went down the shame spiral, and she shut down, and then eventually put them on the TV. They watched a movie, and she took a nap. And so I said to her, well, what would have happened at the very beginning if you said, I really need some rest, go watch a movie? Would they have? And she said yes, but of course there's all these reasons that she didn't want to do that, right? There's all these societal judgments and internal judgments. And so for her, recognizing that she had this like clog, this like clump of hair in the sink, which was her tiredness, and that she really needed to tend to it, and giving herself permission to do that might have actually like prevented this huge, big overflowing sink down the road. So to give yourself permission to, to do whatever it is that you feel you need to do to take care of your own sink, that is being a good parent. So that's one example. In terms of like drain maintenance, so to speak, one of the things that I personally love is journaling. It's a beautiful practice. And one thing that I think can be helpful that some people haven't thought about is audio journaling. So you can just like record yourself. And it can be really therapeutic, honestly. It can be, right. And as a single parent, sometimes you don't have someone who you're able to sort of call and vent to when you need to. And so doing that for yourself in that moment can be really helpful and powerful. And then the third that I'm going to say, which kind of goes hand in hand with that, is working on our own self-talk. So how we talk to ourselves and about ourselves as we are experiencing these tough things, which is not an easy process, but once you sort of work on it and you learn to recognize some of the sort of cognitive brain thinking pitfalls that we fall into, some of the limiting beliefs, and you learn to recognize those things, and you can talk to yourself in a more compassionate way, that can really give that deep self-care that gets you through the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. So if if people want to know about your summit, which is coming up
Yeah.
in the new year, I'm going to say I'm not sure when this episode is going to air, so I'm trying to think when. Maybe tell us about what your summit is, who should come along, the dates, and everything like that.
Yeah, everyone should come. It's going to be awesome. So it's the Single Parenting Summit, not very creative name, I know. And it is the week leading up to Valentine's Day because I thought that that would be a beautiful opportunity to pour some love and connection and support and compassion in during a week that can sometimes be isolating and challenging for single parents. So it's February 10th to the 12th. And then there's a bonus day on the 13th. So, and I have 3 days of amazing speakers, including Stephanie. I'm very excited to have you on. And so we're going to be talking about what I consider sort of the three main like pillars for empowered parenting, which is self-care and understanding your own stuff. So tending to you as the parent, and then understanding your child and really getting to a place where you feel empowered by an understanding of what's underneath the tough stuff, the tough behaviors. And then the third is connecting with your child and supporting them in a way that really authentically meets their needs and that really raises them with what we all want, right? Those thriving, resilient, emotionally healthy kiddos. So 3 days, they're all going to be awesome. I'm super excited. And if you want to hear about that, then if you want to hear about any of my programs, the best bet is to hop on my email list. And you can do that by downloading any of my free resources. I have a guided meditation for single parents that you're welcome to listen to if you're not a single parent as well. I hear it's supportive, not just for single parents, and a guide to understanding tantrums and meltdowns and a short video. So a few resources. So head to my website, hop on my list, and you will be the first to know.
That is wonderful. Okay, we're going to put all the links and everything in the show notes or underneath in the description if you're watching on YouTube, so you can find out where Dr. Gila is. You can follow her. You can look out for the summit coming up in February. That is just so amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Gila. She is such a beautiful soul and she's so knowledgeable. And to be honest, I think you heard how authentic and vulnerable she is. You know, she is the real deal. Just a reminder about her Single Parenting Summit. It is hosted by Dr. Gila. I am lucky enough to be one of the speakers at the summit. It is completely online. It is completely free as well for you to access all 20 of the sessions. So I would love you to go and get your free ticket. Please look at the show notes of this episode or look underneath the video if you're watching on YouTube. Find the link. All you need to do is click that, put your name and email, and you are in. You will get all the videos and all the sessions of the summit into your inbox and you'll be able to watch them all together. So that is pretty amazing. There is an option to upgrade if you want like a VIP kind of option where you get loads more resources, support and things like that. There's a whole package in there that is incredible. So if you want that extra support, you can go for it. But if not, just sign up for free and you'll get access to all the great videos this week. Okay, enjoy guys, stay safe and stay connected and keep raising those emotionally intelligent kids.